Okay.
All right. Got it.
Mag, you're on a roll.
All right. 7, 8, 9 of Daniel 10.
Yeah.
I, Daniel, was the only one who saw the vision. Those who were with me did not see it, but such terror overwhelmed them that they fled and hid themselves. So I was left alone, gazing at this great vision. I had no strength left. My face turned deathly pale, and I was helpless. Then I heard him speaking, and as I listened to him, I fell into a deep sleep, my face to the ground. A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees.
In 7, Daniel sees the Mara. That's the word Mara. He says, I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. That's Mara. Although it's a different Mara. Like if you were to look the number up in Strong's, it'd be the regular Mara is 4758, which is a male version of the word appearance or whatever. This is the next number, Hebrew 4759, which is Mara with an A, M-A-R-A-H. Similar meaning, it's just the feminine version of the same Mara version. So for some reason, he sees this Mara, and the other men run away to hide, and after quaking comes upon him. So, yeah, I put in my notes here. Think of the terror that will come when the coming of Jesus poses to the world. This will scare them, radically scare them.
It'll scare all of us.
Yes.
It'll scare you, me, Dee, Dusty.
Not
We'll all
Megan.
fall to the ground like this guy.
Absolutely.
Not Megan. But we'll fall to the ground just like this poor man with his face to the ground.
So he has no strength in is that verse 8? And Daniel's radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and he retained no strength. So it seems like he saw himself immediately as absolutely nothing.
Right.
In verse I think 9, Daniel hears a phrase, the voice of his words. Give me just a second to find it in my Bible. Then I heard the sound of his words in verse 9. Does everybody have that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, it says it a little differently, but yeah.
What's it say in yours?
I heard him speaking, and as I listened to him, I fell into a deep sleep.
Okay. In some of the other, well, what I do from time to time, one of my methods is this is phrased a little differently. And it makes mention of the sound of his words. I'm sorry, the sound of his words. Okay, so
The voice of his words.
the
When I
voice of
heard,
his words. I don't know why. I think I have the different translation from there it is. I heard the voice of his words. He says it twice. I heard the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words. So I looked that word up, voice, and it's used 6 times in Daniel, and I didn't limit it to Daniel because it's probably spoken a zillion other times. But in Daniel, there's 6 instances. This is obviously one of the 6, so that leaves 5.
this is
Okay.
2 of the 6 now,
Hmm?
because he said it twice.
In some regard, but he says it twice in this verse. He says it twice in Daniel 6. The voice of his words was like a multitude, which I didn't even realize until you mentioned that. And then the voice of a multitude, that seems to be referring to Jesus. Both of those verses, 6 and 9, seem to be Jesus. If we turn back a chapter, in Daniel 9, there's another instance of it in verse 14. And it says, therefore hath the Lord watched over the evil and brought it upon us, for God, Jehovah our God, is righteous in all his works, and we have not obeyed his voice. So his voice there seems to be referring to God. Okay. In Daniel 9:11 is another instance where it talks about his voice not being obeyed, where Daniel's praying for Israel like he did last chapter. He prayed like almost 20 verses for Israel, saying, we haven't listened, we haven't changed, we're wicked, blah, 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 blah. We didn't obey your voice. And in Daniel 9:10, also in the midst of one of his prayers, neither have we obeyed the voice of God to walk in his laws. And in Daniel 8,
Wow.
8:16, this is the first instance in Daniel. This is where Daniel hears the Mara for the first time. He sees the appearance, which is the Mara, and he hears a man's voice between the banks of the river telling Gabriel to make this man understand. So that seems to be referring to Jesus.
Wait, that made him scared too. He was afraid then too and fell on his face.
Right. And he does that a lot in this chapter. He falls down.
Well, I mean, every time Jesus talks, it makes him crazy, scared.
And even sometimes when the angel speaks, he does the same thing. Like in verse, what is it? The second part of verse 9. So we'd want to say, before I go any further, the voice of his words seems to be a phrase that seems to point to either Jesus in the appearance of a Mara or a man, or God. It's referring to God, at least in Daniel it is. So he falls into a deep sleep on his face, with his face toward the ground.
Does yours say, when I heard him speaking, and as I listened, I fell into a deep sleep?
Which were
Like, that was the effect
And 9.
of 6. Like, the effect of his voice caused me to fall into a deep sleep.
Does that mean like pass out? Like he was so scared he passed out? Or is it like a calm? Like I feel like it's more of like a and then he's just like I don't know. How do you
Deep
near
What does yours say, Dar? What does deep sleep say?
if you just look the word up, that's in 9, right? I fell into
Right.
deep sleep, stupefy, to stun, sleep. Could even mean death, cast into a dead. I've heard somebody speak on this, say he thought maybe he fell into a trance. We're not really sure. You would think you wouldn't
Right.
fall asleep, but I think last chapter or the chapter before, didn't Daniel fall asleep when Gabriel was talking to him?
Well, it says that, but I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means he fainted, like he passed out.
Deb, this says that I heard the voice of his words. Then was I in a deep sleep on my face, and my face towards the ground. What is that?
Maybe he realized he was really sleeping. He was having a,
He woke up on the ground after having a dream.
yeah.
Everybody else did run away and hide, remember?
It's petrifying.
Must have been a scary dream.
Or
But
it's,
I don't know.
or
I was just trying to understand, what does that mean, deep sleep? Was it like it put him to sleep, or he fainted?
oh, you're saying what's the
Is it
verb?
the effect? What is the effect of Jesus's voice?
He says first, and then I was. It doesn't say I fell into a deep sleep, although it may be translated like that.
Does that here, yeah.
He hears the voice, but he never really tells us what the voice says to him. He just,
No.
and it seems to hear it like a multitude, right? like a multitude of voices, he says in the end of verse 6. So he hears this and he falls asleep, or he is in a trance, as the Septuagint says, it's trance. And he's on his face on the ground. And that happened in Daniel 8 when Gabriel spoke, 8:18, right after the appearance, or the Mara first appeared.
Right.
He fell asleep then when Gabriel was explaining something to him. So you wondered, say, well, if he was sleeping while Gabriel was talking, did he write everything down? I don't know. And what words did Jesus or the angel say? It doesn't go into any detail about that. In Revelation 1:17, somebody want to just read the first phrase as to what happens to John when he sees Jesus?
Oh, man.
I have it. I can read it.
Okay.
All
Oh, he's dead.
right, so verse 16, then the one who looked like a man touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and began to speak. I said to the one standing before me, I'm overcome with anguish because of the vision, my Lord, and I feel weak. How can I, your servant, talk with you, my Lord? My strength is gone and I can hardly breathe.
Is that Revelation?
Am I in the right place?
Revelation.
Sounds like
Sorry.
this.
I'm in
I feel like I
Daniel.
read that today.
I'm in
Revelation,
Daniel.
Revelation 1:17.
Yeah, I was thinking, wait, I
Sorry.
read that today.
Well, here we go. Here's what happened to John. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead.
Yeah.
And then he placed his right hand on me and said, don't be afraid. I'm the first and the last.
That John, servant John, yeah.
So here we see that the same happened to John, but in fairness, it also happened when Gabriel was speaking before, but it was either right after or during the appearance of the Mara, or the appearance of man in chapter 8. So whether they're both there together as he's explaining to Daniel, and then he falls asleep in chapter 8, or whether in this chapter Daniel's reading, or Daniel sees this vision of Jesus and he crumbles to his feet as dead or sleep. I don't know. I'm not really sure.
But
Let's go
then
back to,
he touches him and sets him on his knees.
I was just going to say, read the next verse, Steve.
Oh, all right.
10:10.
Me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, Daniel, who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I'm about to speak to you. It's like, Daniel, listen. Are you listening? Daniel, do you hear me? And stand up, for I have now been sent to you. And when he said this, I stood up trembling.
So we find that a hand touches him, and he puts him on his knees and upon the palms of his hands. Okay, now, again, we say, is this the same spiritual being that he was just sleeping with, or is this a mighty angel? Is this Jesus? And does this occur at the same time? Did he sleep for a while? I don't really know. I want to assume it follows that it probably was, but a hand touches him while he's face down to the ground. Last chapter also, and that was the angel Gabriel.
Yeah,
The voice in chapter 9, the voice of his words, Jesus's words, I think, is not explained, but he falls asleep, or as one in a trance, and then the next thing you know, something's touching him to waking him up. And then of course in verse 11 he'll speak. But so we're not sure again, is this still Jesus? Is this an angel? An angel touches Daniel last chapter. And Deb, you read a minute ago about how John in Revelation fell as one dead at the feet of Jesus.
yeah.
And Jesus reaches his right hand out and says, fear not, I'm the first and the last.
Yeah.
So it could be Jesus or could be Gabriel. We're not sure. We have two instances that seem to suggest either one has done that in the past. Well, we're not sure. Somebody read 11 and 12. Daniel 10, 11 and 12.
All right. He said, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I'm about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you. And when well, that had to be an angel because he was sent,
Right,
right?
right.
I have been sent to you. And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling.
So you see the difference. There seems to be a change in verse 10. The hand that touches him sets him on his knees, probably is an angel now.
Right, and while he's trembling and scared, he's not passed out from the strength and the awe of the being that's in front of him.
Right,
Do
he's
you know
not,
what I mean?
right. So the heavenly being or Jesus's words are now beginning, again, whatever this is, probably an angel because it's sent. The words are now recorded. We think it's probably an angel, but we're not 100% sure. But he tells Daniel he's greatly beloved. Now, if you remember last chapter, Gabriel tells Daniel he's greatly loved. And he
Yeah.
goes to great lengths to tell him to understand the words. And you can and we know because we've been reading this for months now. And these words are so hard because even just the change in spiritual beings from, 7, 8, 9 to 10 and 11, we think it's just changed just based on their actions and the fact that their words are recorded. When Jesus's words weren't listed, they were only referred to as the words of his voice or the voice of his words. So it's a little different here. So he's supposed to understand, which is the same word Gabriel uses in Daniel 9, when he's trying to talk about the 70 weeks. Make sure you understand this, Daniel,
Like,
And
are you listening?
here, the difference is the angel gets him on his hands and knees,
Right.
but it's Daniel's job seemingly to stand upright. Because he says, and whereas it says, stand upright. So the angel will say, okay, we'll assist you in getting in your hands and knees, but you need to stand upright. For unto thee I'm now sent, which yes, he seems to be some type of angelic being.
Yeah.
So he stands here trembling, but you see the progression. And that's probably meaningful, although I don't really understand it myself. I guess maybe it's our job to stand upright when we feel like God is calling us. Maybe I'm not really sure.
There's probably some significance.
And it says, unto thee I've been sent. So he's got a boss, right? This being does. So he's sent by somebody. So here's a few things that I found in sending, and we won't turn to it, but the word sent 4 times used in Daniel, 5 times, because this is one of them. Nebuchadnezzar the king sends to gather the satraps, the deputies, the governors, the judges, the treasurers, blah, 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 to come to a dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar set up back in Nebuchadnezzar or Daniel 3. Remember that?
Yep.
So he sends his men to gather everybody. And in the same chapter, verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar speaks and he says, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered thee from like the fiery furnace. Chapter 5 in Daniel, then was part of the hand sent. Remember the handwriting on the wall that appeared? It was sent from before God, and this writing was inscribed. So God sent that hand. And in verse 6, or chapter 6, 22, God sends his angel who shut the lion's mouth, and it has not hurt me. So the sent seems to suggest it's an action of a boss or somebody that's above to somebody that's an underling. So we
Yeah.
could say that's pretty strong, that's somewhat strong evidence it might be an angel. So Daniel's trembling still.
Yeah.
The heavenly being tells him the first day that he set his heart to understand and humble himself before God, his words were heard. But this heavenly being came because of his words. In verse, was that 11 or 12? 12. So what did Daniel try and understand or set his heart to understand that the angel's referencing here?
Gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God. Understand the words that I speak.
Vision?
Yeah, probably the vision, probably the Mara vision, I would think, or maybe
'Cause
both.
wasn't he fasting and praying with that? Like he didn't anoint himself?
Well, actually, that's
was
the
scared
second part, I think, too. What'd you say, Meg?
Wasn't he scared? That's why he was fasting, or wait, what did they say?
Morning.
Mourning.
And he afflicted himself because he was mourning. And I think that's where he's humbling himself that the angel's referring to here. He did it in verse 2 and 3. And it says what words did Daniel speak that caused the heavenly being? I wonder what words he's referring to.
What?
So,
I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, I'm reading the part that
What did?
Huh?
I'm reading the part that Debbie read.
What part? Oh, and she
Like,
went to
Way
verse 17.
down. I jumped way ahead.
I'm
Somebody want to
sorry.
read?
Give us a preview.
Yeah.
Somebody read 13 and 14 in Daniel 10.
But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael,
Did you go?
I can't hear. I
Yeah.
heard her mouth.
Are you
We couldn't
mute?
hear you, Max.
I couldn't hear you, Meg.
Oh,
can you hear me now?
Yeah. we
yeah.
can.
Sorry. This is 13 and 14.
Yeah.
Okay. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come.
So the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstands them 21 days. Who is the prince of Persia?
Is that the devil? Or is it literally the king, the prince, the kingdom of Persia, the prince?
I'm guessing it's a
Spiritual
spiritual.
being, but
Yeah.
what is the spiritual?
I think it's a demonic
What is-
principality.
Yeah,
Who's been given
Yeah.
rulership over Persia, just like we talked about a few months ago in Psalms 82 and 89.
Yeah, with all those like
Little
different-
gods, like they were
Yeah.
like who always disobeyed God because they never listened to him, right? So this seems to be one here who's over Persia. Now Persia rules the land right now, right?
Yeah.
And God's people are in the Mede-Persian kingdom, so maybe that gives him some special authority or something to fight against God's, Michael. So the heavenly being, I'm guessing, is some form of angel. Michael, one of the princes, comes to help. Michael remains with the prince of Persia and frees the angel to continue onward to Daniel. Who do you suppose Michael is?
what's that?
Who's Michael?
The
Yeah.
archangel?
It would seem.
Isn't that what you said, Gus?
Yeah.
Like we're still like, where does that even come from, and why does he, like, everything is calculated? There's not a word, nothing is done oh crap, I told you his name. I shouldn't have. Like, where does that even, like Michael's mentioned a few other
Not
times if
important
you
for us
study.
to know,
Yeah.
right?
So it's
Why?
Michael and somebody.
What's that, Meg?
So it's Michael and somebody, since he said Michael came to help me.
I'm guessing this is Gabriel, like,
Oh, yeah, Gabriel.
because remember, Michael's seemingly the prince.
That's the one
Gotcha.
that's mentioned with Jesus, right?
What's that?
Is Michael the one that's always mentioned with Jesus?
I think some people think that it might be a reference to Jesus, but
Oh,
I'm not sure how. There's a Mara, which seems to be Jesus, and then there's a Michael. I don't really understand how there could be two references, but I never really studied. I've never looked at it before, but
Well, he's one of the angelic rulers. It says he's a prince, right? He's one of the chief princes. So he's one of the angelic rulers.
right. So these guys seem to have to fight spiritual battles, which Daniel knew nothing of. We certainly don't see. I think Harry's told me a few of his dreams before he's seen them
That's the weird stuff.
fighting over his bed and stuff in the middle of the night. But
Scary.
so an angel arrives to inform Daniel what's to happen to his people in the latter days. This is said, I think, in verse 14.
mhm.
So he came to understand what shall befall in the latter days. The vision, here the vision is the chalzone is for many days. Now let's look at something real quick.
Oh.
Let's share this screen with you just for a sec. I don't think we looked at this one. Now, remember we looked at part of this last time. This is potentially a timeline of what Daniel's saying. We looked at the Mara. And here we see the first 7 weeks of the 49 years, and then the 434 years, and then the 7 years here, and Jesus dies in the middle.
Mhm.
But we see up top, it's 490 years total for the Mara.
Yeah,
But the chalzone seems to be something that's 2,300 days or possibly years. And I think the idea may be, if you see up top here, which is 2,300 years, it may be a reference from this beginning here at the beginning of the Mara, because the Mara may be a part of a portion of the chalzone. See, the Mara being from here to here, but the bigger picture could very well be the 2,300 years of the chalzone, which extends possibly into the future. I don't know. I don't know if this is true. I never really looked at the date. But it seems to be, the image seems to be the chalzone's the entire 2,300 years, while the Mara is just a portion of it. But the Mara represents Jesus, this period of time where the appearance of man. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
yeah.
So if the Mara is not accomplished, which it is, then you wouldn't have a way, because Jesus comes and the temple's destroyed, and he does all those things that he said back in chapter, it was 8 or 9, that he came to do, the elimination of sin and, all that stuff, and to set the anointed. Well, in order for this ending point way down the line to occur, this has to be established first, because it's all based on Jesus's work, if that makes any sense.
So where would that take us? 2,300 years?
Well, that's the problem, Deb. I don't know for a fact. This is just somebody's idea that it's like the cleaning of his temple began in 1844, because that's where they got the number of years. I don't know if that's I don't look at 1844 and say that's the date, but it seems to be sometime way off into the future. And the idea seems to be Jesus comes, his natural people, their temple is trashed, but God rolls it out into his spiritual people here, moving forward. But then they follow the same path in a spiritual way, and their temple's trashed. And Jesus comes here. And I don't want to think, I don't, obviously 1844, almost 200 years from that.
I
But
wonder if back in that time, Dar, people were going, Jesus is coming. It's 1844.
I bet some did. But I think the point seems to be he comes and he cleaned his natural temple, but then he cleans a spiritual temple at some point by his second coming. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That's how I think it could be. Getting back to what we're saying here. Somebody read 15, verse 15 in Daniel 10.
I thought Debbie already read it. Go ahead, Deb.
While he was saying this to me, I bowed my face toward the ground and was speechless. Then one who looked like a man touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and began to speak. Am I supposed to read to the end of that?
Yeah, just 15.
All right, well, that's 15.
That's 16.
Yeah, I started reading 16.
It's okay. So the angel says, it had to be, wait a minute, that what was spoken by the angel in 15 when he had spoken unto me according to these words. So he says to Daniel, either, because the Chalzone, the bigger of the two visions, which covers the New Testament people that will go off in apostasy, that will need to be cleaned too. But God's Mara, which is Jesus, covers both of them by his death. The Chalzone that he says he talks about occurs in the latter days in 14. And then as soon as Daniel hears and he's saying, okay, we're talking about the 2300 days, Daniel falls to the ground and is dumb. So the words the angel speaks has to be what happens to Daniel's people, I guess, that are in the latter days. So we think that it's referring to the bigger Chalzone picture because that's what the angel refers to as.
Yeah, it keeps saying, and then this angel was speaking to me, and then I fell down. But it doesn't say in all this, and here's what he said. It's just like, I fell down.
It does say he fell down, but it does say, then he said, oh no.
Then he
Oh.
talks about, I'm so weak.
Yeah,
And
and
anyway.
now I come to make thee understand what shall befall thee, thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days. And when he spoke such things or such words unto me, I set my face toward the ground. What? I don't get it.
I think what's
All right,
being said
that's
is that the angel tells him, and he doesn't share with us. Hello. He doesn't share with us in the specifics of what the angel says, D. He just seems seems to generalize that, yeah, this is going to happen in the latter days. And Daniel's reaction is to be silent or tongue-tied or dumb. And I think it must be similar to when he was in mourning. He's like, you're kidding. Like, really? Like, this is what becomes of us?
This is awful.
We apostatize and we go off on our own way, and that's that. Are you kidding me?
Like
And
he expected a whole nation, like a whole kingdom of the Jews, right? And when he found out that wasn't going to happen, then that bummed him out.
yeah, I would think he would be, yeah, it'd be like kind of discouraging, wouldn't? Yeah, go back to your
Well, I
land.
mean, look, he's praying and waiting for the first restoration
Yeah.
of the temple.
Yeah,
That's what he's looking forward to. And this guy's telling them, oh, and by the way, it's going to be destroyed again and desecrated again. And everybody's going to come to ruin again.
Like
And
it
he's
was
like,
overwhelming.
well, what it like, oh no, you're kidding.
And I think too, he gets the Mara Jesus, and he must realize, yeah, it's going to be destroyed then. But the Chalzone part of it says, and then we're going to be rebuilt again and then destroyed yet a second time.
Right.
Beyond that, like that's got to be bewildering to say the least.
Right.
So he
Apparently
falls.
more than Will
She's trying to
bummed
find
him out.
So
Big time.
he falls silent there, and he has no strength. And that's where we'll stop. We'll be able to pick it up next time, and then hopefully we'll get into 11.
Oh,
Okay.
good, okay.
Yeah, so, but yeah, it is kind of perplexing, and it's hard to know exactly what's the
What
right
he's
word?
saying.
Yeah,
What's
because he's not very clear.
It does make sense though, because he's praying and mourning and fasting for his people. And the angel's like, oh, by the way, those people you're praying for who are going to have their temple rebuilt, that Jerusalem's going to be rebuilt, and he'll dedicate it back to the Lord. Oh, by the way, they're going to be destroyed again. Because they're
Well,
going to end up in the same place.
isn't God's plan, period, confusing? Like,
Yeah.
isn't like, why did you go to all that work and then have your people go wander off?
Right. I think what's striking is how long he gives people. Like he gives people he gave them a very long time from the time the temple was, rebuilt. Like he gave them a long time. In the Old Testament with the prophets, he gave them hundreds and hundreds of years, and they still were like, oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Which is, I
right.
don't know how many generations.
And even like when we were reading last chapter, when Daniel's praying for his people, he's like, yeah, well, we really haven't changed, and
No.
we're still the same. Like, well, why did God intervene? Well, on behalf of a very small group, it seems like, like the rest of them didn't really, didn't seem like they really changed at all, even though they were away for 70 years. They just acclimated to where they were and became,
And just have brief periods of time where they would be enthusiastic and want to follow God, and then their enthusiasm would drop off, and then they would be like back to griping, complaining, and following other gods.
just like me.
Just like me.
Me.
How about you, Megan?
I said,
Megan, come on.
We're watching you down there.
What are you doing, Megan? Are the babies there? Will.
Will's right here.
Lily. Hi,
Right.
baby. Hi, buddy.
Hi.
Listen, did your team win in the field day?
Yeah.
Really? That's fabulous.
Good job, buddy.
Field day?
Yeah,
that.
that's
Last year it was a draw.
Oh,
But this year you won.
this year you won.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Congrats, Baba.
Hey, Gussie, I'll text you tomorrow.
Okay.
What is that?
I believe that's the computer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Look at
check
that.
Oh, we're less than a minute, guys, so we'll be cut in just a sec, okay?
all right. All right.
Good
Bye,
night, Lily.
everybody.
We'll see you guys at the pool, hopefully
Bye.
this weekend.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sunday is when I can go.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Hopefully we can go.
Bye,
All right.
guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.